Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're going to talk to you about making every minute count, maximizing speaking in short lessons. Very, very good. Well, first things first, let me introduce myself. I'm Felipe Emerick. I'm one of the academic coordinators at Cultura Inglesa São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm mostly responsible there for the in-service training for teacher development. But I'm not alone. I have here my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Silvia, English teacher and former head teacher at Cultura Inglesa. Felipe and I are here today to share some insights we've had towards how to boost our students' speaking talking time. Right, Felipe?
Exactly, Sil. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Well, first, a bit of our context for you to better understand where we're coming from. So, we both work at Cultura Inglesa. Cultura Inglesa is a very large language institute, and we've just turned 90. So, yeah, we had our 90th anniversary last year. So, we're a very solid language institute here in Brazil. Originally from São Paulo, perhaps the most important financial center in Brazil, Cultura is now spread over 9 states in Brazil. So our operation has grown after the pandemic. And these states include São Paulo and Rio, which are, as I mentioned, the perhaps the two most important financial centers of the country. So we have nearly 150 schools as part of our operation over the 9 states and more than 600 teachers. So, a lot of people, and our commitment, of course, is to give our students the best possible learning experience in class, both in the in person mode and the remote mode. These are the two modes we have at Cultura now. Well, this 60-minute thing is here because this is the heart of our presentation and the heart of the matter, I'd say. Yeah, it always started back at 2020 when we were in the pandemic. We had to transition, of course, to remote lessons. But as of 2021, when we started gradually to return to the so-called normal teaching mode, yeah, whatever it means, we had to change a number of things. And one of the adaptations we had to make was to the time of our lessons. Previously, we used to have 100-minute lessons, so 1 hour, 40 minutes. But then we had to change to 60 minutes lessons. So in most contexts, our lessons last 60 minutes. So usually students will come in twice a week, say Monday and Wednesday, for 60 minutes on Monday and 60 minutes on Wednesday. And then, of course, the problem was that our teachers still had this mindset of teaching a 1 hour, 40-minute lesson. And then they would teach and get excited. And then halfway through the lesson, when practice was about to start, it was already the end of the lesson because, yes, the lesson doesn't last 100 minutes anymore. It lasts 60 minutes. So our driving question was how to ensure a strong focus on speaking in shorter lessons now. That's what we tried to investigate, and what Sylvia and I are going to share here are best practices that we developed with our teams to make it possible to make this perception of speaking go higher even in short lessons. You're going to see that nothing we're going to share is really groundbreaking or new. We're not reinventing the wheel, but then we're going to approach it in a slightly different manner so that it works for teachers and above all for our students, right, Sil?
Exactly, Felipe. So as you can see, guys, our first decision was in terms of changing the lesson framework. So previously, students would have 100-minute lesson, and we would spend at around 50% of the lesson only for the input. In other words, to prepare and equip these students for the language use. However, with this new frame, we couldn't keep it. So we decided to have a balance between the input and the output, which is the true student talking time. So how do we do that? Here at Cultura, we decided to have this input moment only a third of the lesson, whereas the student talking time, the real practice would happen in the other two-thirds. So it means they would have around 40 or even more time for practice. So to sum up this frame, what we would do is we would have more lessons with student centeredness, uh, then the language presentation with more quick pace and direct language presentation using demand hyphen, Underhill, and Scrivener, and of course focusing on student practice and production. Right, Felipe?
Yeah, exactly. And this framework helped a lot, guys, because previously that's the representation. So in a 100-minute lesson, we would usually take about half an hour, 40 minutes to get started. I mean, to contextualize and then present language. And only after 40 minutes or so would we start practicing. But again, with a 60-minute lesson, much shorter lesson, we have to guarantee that this practice starts much, 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 much earlier. And if we maximize time for practice, we have to minimize or optimize the time for language presentation, the leading and language presentation. And that's exactly our second matter here, because the first problem was how to maximize speaking in a shorter lesson. So let's change the frame, the time frame. That was the first solution. The second problem or issue or driving question was how can we then present language in a much more concise, straight to the point way? And that's what we sort of started experimenting with. So I'm going to do here what we've been training our teachers to do. So, okay, guys, this is me. I'm a teacher, yeah, and a teacher has a very, very busy routine, lots of things to do. So, for example, today, what's my routine? I wake up at 7, wake up at 7, then I have breakfast, yeah, I have breakfast at 7, and I go to work. I take the bus to work and then I start work at 9. I teach, 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 have lunch, teach, 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 teach more and more. And I finish work at 10. 10 at night. So I go home. I'm very tired and I go to bed. Yeah. But then my brother, have a look at my brother, Rodrigo. His name is Rodrigo. He has a different routine. Rodrigo is not a teacher. Rodrigo is an IT person. So he works with computers, information technology, IT. And Rodrigo works from home. So Rodrigo has a different routine. Remember, I wake up at 7. Rodrigo wakes up at 9. I have breakfast at 9. And Rodrigo has breakfast at 10. Rodrigo starts work. He works a little bit, then stops for lunch. And then he finishes work at 7 p.m. When he finishes work, you know what he does? He works from home, remember? So he is already at home. He goes out with his friends. He has lots and lots of time to go out with his friends. So, guys, who do you think has a busier routine? The teacher or Rodrigo, my brother? The teacher, of course. I'm always very tired. Yeah. Guys, did you pay attention to what I said? I said, what time do I have breakfast? Remember? Yeah, I said this. I have breakfast at 7 a.m. I have breakfast at 7 a.m. But Rodrigo, my brother Rodrigo, he has breakfast at 9. I have breakfast at 7. Rodrigo has breakfast at 9. I start work at 9, but Rodrigo starts work at 10. I finish work at 10 p.m., 10 at night. So I go home. I go home at 10 p.m. And Rodrigo, he goes out at night after work. Can you believe that? So if you pay attention to the actions, the verb to say, I said, I have breakfast before Rodrigo. Rodrigo has. I start work. Rodrigo starts. So what's the difference? Yes, there's this S. When I talk about Rodrigo, I put an S. I start, Rodrigo starts. Why? Exactly. Yes, because it's he. So when I talk about Rodrigo, he, or Silvia, she, I put an S to the verb. Yeah. So let's practice. So that would be, guys, pretty much the language presentation. So much more focused, straight to the point. And then instead of going over and over and over the grammar rules and then the spelling for the verbs, third person, no, we're going to do this later during the practice. But if I've contextualized and raised students' interest, and then I've clarified language and particularly the use of language, then I can jump straight into the practice so that students can actually manipulate the language. And again, as I said, nothing new. Perhaps that's already what you do, yeah. But for our teachers, this was a game changer because remember, they were used to doing a much, much, much longer and more thorough and more teacher centered clarification of language. And here we do something very succinct and move straight into practice. So our second problem was how to present language in a more concise way. And that's the solution we found and we've been implementing. So make it quick, perhaps tell an anecdote, say a little something just to contextualize, go to the target language, check what is key, and then move on. You can continue clarifying language during the practice stages. Yeah. And that's exactly our third point, how to practice language. So if we have much more time for practice now, we've optimized time for presentation, input, remember, so output is now much longer. Here we have in this sample lesson plan 3 practice stages. Again, guys, nothing new. Perhaps that's what you already do with your groups. But the point is, how can you really continue clarifying language and giving students more opportunities to practice in speaking, to really have more speaking? What we would do for this lesson is first we would do drills. So perhaps the whole group drill, chorus repetition. I go to work at 7. Now he goes to work at 7. Transformation drills, or even a chain drill. So Sylvia says, I start work at 7, and then I say, well, Sylvia starts work at 7. I start work at 9, and then the third student, and then we have this chain drill. We'll be repeating orally, so it's oral production, and I'll be practicing. Yeah. Then we would move on to something like controlled practice, a gap fill exercise. It's written exercise, so I can practice the third person singular spelling. We would check answers just like we would do in a normal, regular lesson. But then after that, we would use the very same activity to do a disappearing text. I block parts of the text and I have students read aloud, and then I block other parts of the text and then more parts of the text, so that I sort of force or push students to practice the same text a second, third, fourth, fifth time in a fun, in a light way. Yeah, that's one of the principles and one of the techniques here for this matter of demand high, as Scrivener and Underhill put forward, just like Sylvia mentioned, is not that I'm going to make things more difficult, but I'm going to give students more challenge and playful challenge so that they can take in this challenge, and then with the feedback I give them, they upgrade the language, they'll be practicing more, speaking more, and then this perception of speaking goes higher. I can still use the same activity to have them personalize the text. So I'm not creating different activities. I'm using the very same activity to do a second practice with a different focus and a third practice with a third focus. That's what Underhill and Scrivener call the 3 times practice, maximizing practice with the same materials. Yeah. And then I would move on to the less controlled practice to wrap up the lesson here. Students would have to interview each other. So, Sylvia, what's your job? Oh, I'm a secretary, and so on and so forth. Then they would work with a different partner to introduce their previous partner. So, look, João, this is Sylvia. She's a secretary. And then, of course, they would be practicing the third person singular to describe a friend's routine. Again, guys, I'm just reinforcing here. Perhaps it's nothing different from what you're really been doing so far, but for our teachers, that was really, really different. So let's maximize time. Let's do more in less time and with fewer resources or fewer activities. The secret here is feedback. Teacher will give feedback all the time, and this feedback helps them upgrade the language. That's the example of the disappearing text. So here's the text after they've completed the exercise, and then all of a sudden some parts of the text disappear, so they have to read aloud, remember from it, and then more parts disappear, and then more parts will say up until the point you have nearly no text. They have to remember, recall from memory, and they will have practiced again a second, third, fourth, 10th time in a very fun, playful way. Yeah, so these were a couple of things we experimented with and had lots and lots of good results in the sense of maximizing perception of learning, right? But that's not all, right, Sil?
Absolutely. So, guys, as you all know, and Felipe has just mentioned the importance of feedback, but only feedback for the sake of it. So, how can we make learning truly more visible? So, previously, students were practicing, but even with this increasing time, they couldn't really perceive how much progress they were really making. So we need to make it even more visible, involving these learners in the whole process from the beginning to the end, right? And so feedback and assessment are crucial over here. So we have a lot of tools. Some of them are here, such as checklists, peer assessment, self assessment, which are super important for students. And also this reflection moment. How well am I doing? What else do I need to keep improving? What comes next? What else can I do to keep improving? So, this is super important. And one way we can do it is by using success criteria. For this activity in which we are talking about routine, for example, of our brothers, sisters, so on and so forth, we could use something like this. So, we could promote and set certain things they need to produce during this moment, right? So, for example, 8 daily routine expressions, the correct use of third person singular form, including morning, afternoon, evening moments. Right, Felipe?
Yeah, and the important thing here is that if you show this and agree on this with students before they start the task, then they know the rules of the game before the game starts. And then it's much, much, much better to self regulate and self assess or to make really learning visible. Yeah. Summing up, guys, these were the four things we did. So we had four key problems, so to speak, or issues. And these were the four solutions we found for better and more speaking in shorter lessons. First, a structured lesson framework prioritizing student language output. Then, second, a concise language presentation focusing on use of language, not rules or memorization. Third, more time for practice, better exploring fewer activities using the premises of demand high. That's the key. Yeah, let's explore more, fewer resources. And fourth, success criteria to enhance this perception of learning on our students. Again, perhaps this is something you've been doing already with your groups, but what else could you do that could make them see maximize their perception? It's all about perception, guys. Perception of learning, perception of speaking. With our students, the more they perceived they were speaking, the more they perceived they were learning. They really equal more speaking to more learning, and then they become more satisfied. Yeah, we've put together this super basic but bibliography for you with two books you might already know by Scrivener and by Thornbury, but also the Demand High ELT website, which is a lovely source of wonderful ideas. And if you'd like to know more about Demand High, and also this website Arts Achieve, which is fantastic if you would like to learn more about success criteria and formative assessment as a whole. So, how can I get the bibliography here, the references?
This is it. So not only you can have access to the bibliography, but also to all this material, guys. So please access everything via this QR code available here on the screen. And I'd like to thank you very much for this moment, guys. I hope it was really profitable to everyone.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Contact us here via email, and we're available for questions and comments now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. See you around.